I had a raging Karen in the first lane of the drive-thru yelling at me. I just listened and listened. And when she was done, I let her sit there for a second. Then, once I had her full attention, I uttered a sentence that shut her down for good. I simply responded, "Ma'am, take it easy." I waited a second, expecting her to blow up again. But her reaction was even more surprising. She was so shocked that she just sat there for a moment before driving away without uttering another word. We never saw her again.
I had a job at our local community pool, where they have a rule against people bringing in any food or drinks from outside. So, Karen was quite ticked off when I told her this, especially since she had just splashed out $12 on a fancy Starbucks coffee. She protested, telling me that the other town's public pool had no issue with it. However, I kept giving her the standard reply, stressing that our rules don't permit outside food or drinks at the pool. What happened next left me speechless. Karen intentionally spilled the coffee all over our computer. I immediately called the police. They took her into custody, and I heard she got a charge and was convicted for destruction of property.
I used to work at a store that sold outdoor equipment. My most memorable day on the job involved a colleague of mine, Mitch. He was a former Marine whose job was to repair bicycles. Mitch was heading to the back of the store to fetch a spare part when an unruly customer, who'd already been causing a scene, roughly grabbed him by the arm, trying to swing him around. Well, it turns out that he'd messed with the wrong guy. Mitch's military instinct surged forth. Before we knew it, the customer was sprawled on top of a destroyed display, a good 8 feet from where he originally stood. He quickly recovered, started shouting threats about suing us and getting my colleague fired. Our manager stepped in, reviewed the security tapes, and made her decision. She informed the belligerent customer that it was unacceptable to manhandle employees that way. In fact, she offered to contact the police on his behalf, ready to press assault charges on Mitch's behalf, and serve the terrible customer with a lifetime ban. No one in the store mourned the loss of that guy. He'd mistreated all of us at one point or another, and now, thanks to Mitch, we never had to see him again.
I had a telephone chat with the customer about a problem we were unable to solve. After a lot of back and forth, the customer expressed dissatisfaction by saying, "That's not good enough." Feeling a bit frustrated by now, I reminded her, "Just because you don't like the outcome doesn't change it." She immediately retorted, "That's quite unprofessional." To this, I responded, "Your opinion of it being unprofessional doesn't alter the outcome, either." Then she demanded to speak with my supervisor. I'll never forget that moment, knowing that I was about to ruin her day just like she'd ruined mine. I confidently informed her, "I am the supervisor. It seems we're going around in circles. If you wish, you can email me with your complaint, and I'll assess whether it needs further escalation." She didn't sound too pleased when the call ended.
I'm a professional mover, and one time we were undertaking a massive move. Picture two 26-feet trucks filled to the brim, largely with artwork. When I picked up one painting, the client casually told me, "Oh, that's one of the cheaper ones." Well, the $50,000 price tag on the back begged to differ. The move was from a sprawling mansion to a city apartment that occupied an entire floor in a building. The elevator opened directly into the apartment itself. By the time we reached the unloading stage, night had fallen. Packing and moving all of their heavy, expensive items was a real challenge, especially with the clients hovering around us. They even attempted to dissuade us from taking a lunch break, offering pizza instead. But we needed real food, and we also needed a break from their constant presence. The woman, a classic Karen type, stressed that the freshly varnished floors couldn't have cardboard boxes placed on them in case the fibers got stuck to the wood. Unsurprisingly, when we started moving in furniture, she became overly particular about its placement, a task that's typically not a mover's responsibility. One member of our crew was ready to quit then and there, but I had a strategy. I told him to stay in the truck while I managed the situation. I let my team relax while I took the brunt of her demands. First, I stacked the cardboard boxes on every windowsill, blocking every view from the apartment with boxes right up to the ceiling. Next, I covered the kitchen counters with boxes piled high, ensuring Karen would need to unpack them all before even starting to sort out her kitchen. Then, we filled up the kitchen floor, then every bathroom. We avoided all of the wooden floors, of course. During this whole process, I constantly asked her about where to place every item. Should it go here, or maybe a bit there? My team had all taken their breaks by this point, but I tirelessly carried on. Then, at last, after an exhausting 14-hour day, I walked in carrying a dresser. "Where do you want this?" I asked. She looked around at the clutter and hesitated. I knew I'd finally tired her out. She replied, "Screw it, just put it anywhere, I don't care anymore." We loaded the rest in without a single complaint and got out of there quick.
During my time managing a movie theater, we used to have a regular couple, who I'll refer to as Karen and Boss. Boss earned his nickname due to his frequent use of the term boss in his conversations with us. In fact, we were so accustomed to their routine that we would start preparing their food from the snack bar as soon as we saw them at the ticket booth. By the time they made their way to us, their order was ready exactly as they liked it. I would consider that as excellent service for a regular patron. However, despite our efforts, Karen had a knack for finding something to complain about. Rather than addressing them directly to us, she chose a strange method. Karen would email the movie theater chain's head office. Every time a complaint reached us, we'd offer them complimentary tickets and snacks. Amid all this, we had another regular visitor, Bob. Bob had a unique way of showing appreciation. He cooked for us not just simple meals, but full, homemade Italian feasts. We all adored Bob, and he was genuinely good-natured. In fact, Bob and our general manager developed a strong friendship, often sharing meals at Bob's house. One day, as Karen and Boss entered, Bob and the general manager were engaged in a conversation. Spotting them, the general manager sighed heavily, earning a puzzled look from Bob. When the general manager told Bob about Karen's habitual complaining despite our stellar service, Bob was surprised. That's when he told us that Karen was his cousin. The general manager even showed Bob the latest complaint email from her. Without wasting a moment, Bob hurried over to Karen and confronted her about her complaints. From that day forward, Karen never sent another complaint to headquarters.
This was, hands down, the best interaction I've ever had at work. This customer, a total Karen, started complaining about not wanting to pay the price we had quoted for her computer repair, the very same price she agreed when she dropped it off. Then, she asked to speak with the manager, so I got him from the back. The manager patiently listened as she rattled off why she believed she was entitled to a discounted rate. Her reasoning made no sense. The manager made eye contact with me from over her shoulder. I kept my cool. Then he firmly stated that no, the initial quote was final. She was clearly unhappy and declared it unacceptable. She even threatened to voice her complaints to the owner, who she claimed was her good friend. I had to try my hardest to stop myself from laughing hysterically. The manager casually pointed out that he must not be such a good friend if she didn't recognize him. Yep, that's right, my manager that day just happened to be the owner. The look on her face was priceless and made the entire ordeal worth it.
I worked at a coffee chain and normally there were quite a few people working with me, but on the night in question, I was the only one on duty, which meant that I was basically the stand-in manager. Just as the day was winding up, a woman stormed in, furious that we were out of decaffeinated coffee. She wanted to vent to a supervisor. Well, that was me since it happened to be a one-man show that day. She demanded that I make her a pot of decaf, even though it was something like 2 minutes before closing, and all the coffee equipment had been cleaned for the night as we were packing up. I told her that I was sorry, but that getting the equipment going on and brewing the coffee would take about 10 minutes. Hurling insults at me, she screamed that she would find an actual manager and have me fired. She even grabbed a container off the counter and splashed me with the leftover coffee residue. I was shook. She was so mad that it seemed like she was going to jump over the counter. I was freaked out, but I told her I was gonna call the cops and grabbed the phone and pretended to start dialing. That actually made her leave, and I locked the door behind her, but she was about to get her comeuppance. A minute later, she came running at the door. I guess she was coming back to yell a bit more. Well, I guess she didn't see me lock the sliding glass doors ... and she ran straight into them, like a disoriented bird. She picked herself up, humiliated, and slinked back to her car.
Here's a story from my time working at Steak and Shake. A customer came in wielding a coupon for a burger, fries, and a shake at a discount. However, the small print on the coupon clearly detailed a 39-cent additional charge for cheese on the burger, despite featuring an image of a cheesy burger. It was a corporate mistake, but still, nothing could have braced me for her extreme reaction. She created quite a scene in the restaurant, accusing me of unfair treatment and false advertising. I explained that while the picture may be misleading, the cost of the cheese was clearly noted in the fine print, and sadly, I didn't have the power to change it. I tried highlighting that we were arguing over a handful of pennies, but she wouldn't stop yelling. A woman dining nearby had overheard our conversation. She got up, placed 50 cents on the table to cover the cost of the cheese, and said, "Here, the cheese is on me if you promise to shut your mouth." It stunned us both into silence.
I used to work part-time at a grocery store's bakery. As you can imagine, I had my fair share of difficult customers. We had a binder that was brimming with laminated copies of nearly 100 different designs that our skilled decorators churned out on a regular basis. Customers would flick through the pages, select a design they fancied, and share the specifics like when they wanted it, the size, the flavor, and any modifications in color. Our decorators would start their day early at 7 a.m. and would typically remain on duty until they finished all of their assignments located in our order queue. Typically, they'd clock out by early to mid-afternoon. The bakery and the store both closed up for the day at 9 p.m. one evening around 8:15 or 8:20 p.m. A lady popped in with a request for a cake. At first, I thought she must be interested in the cakes that were readily available in our cooler for those who needed a quick and unfussy option. I pointed towards the cooler and asked her if she liked anything she saw. Apparently, I must have cracked her up because she bursts out laughing and corrects me by saying, "No, honey, I need a wedding cake." I pulled out an order form, jotted down her details, and inquired when she would need it. Her answer blew me away. She told me, "Tonight." Considering the time and the fact that we were closing in 40 minutes, even if I had the prowess to decorate a cake, I wouldn't be able to fulfill her needs. So I politely informed her that our decorators had clocked out for the day, but assured her that the cake would be ready to pick up the next day. While she wasn't thrilled, she muttered that it'd work. Continuing with her order, I asked her to specify the size she needed. Our bakery wasn't exactly high-end and our pricing was reflective of this. Nearly all of our items were delivered to us frozen. We had a standard set of sizes for our cakes available. She pulled out her phone hurriedly and thrust it towards me, saying whatever that is. The image of the cake on her phone was breathtaking: pristine white frosting, 7-8 tiers, adorned with fondant decorations and blown sugar. Before moving any further with her order and letting her down when she saw the end result, I explained to her that recreating this masterpiece was beyond our capabilities. This wasn't a denigration of our decorators' skills. They were extremely talented self-taught bakers who didn't have professional education. I kindly suggested another chic bakery that I knew could cater to her sophisticated needs better than us. I should have seen her answer coming. She asked, "Can I speak to your manager?" At that time, having worked at the bakery for well over a year, I was entrusted with the responsibility of closing up the department single-handedly. Given this, I was the only one around. I conveyed this to her but agreed to jot down her contact details for the manager to reach out to her the following day. Then she asked for the store manager. On any given night, the grocery store would have between 1 and 3 store managers supervising the store and its departments. So, I used our store phone to request a store manager to come over to the bakery. While we waited for the manager, she was shooting me death stares. A manager I was quite chummy with arrived at the counter in no time and asked what the problem was. Before she interacted with the customer, I briefed her. Upon reaching the customer, the lady began weaving lie after lie about me, accusing me of being dismissive and refusing to accommodate her. My manager listened to her rant for a good 10 minutes, and when she finished, the manager came to the back shaking her head and massaging her temples.
This happened at the tail end of a rush when I worked at a fast food place. No one had been out to check on the utensils and condiments because we'd been slammed with customers for over an hour. That's when I noticed a kid banging away on the ketchup dispenser, which was clearly so empty it was like trying to get blood from a stone. I figured it was time to step in. I went over and said, "Hey kid, I'm sorry but I have to refill this thing. I'll be right back," and I grabbed the dispenser to take it to the back. I cleaned the thing up in the kitchen and refilled it, but when I brought it back out, a furious-looking lady was waiting for me. She started screaming and asking why I'd snatched the ketchup from her son. I calmly explained that it needed refilling, but she accused me of stealing it and told me to get the manager. Well, there was something she didn't know. I was the manager. This really made her angry. She kept yelling and asking why I'd hijacked the ketchup from her son. Once again, I calmly explained exactly what had happened. When I asked her to lower her volume, she told me not to tell her what to do and asked me, "Do you know who I am?" I told her I had no idea who she was, and she told me she wouldn't rest until the place was burnt to the ground. At this point, I was fed up. The other customers were clearly disturbed by her threat, so I decided to call the cops. When they arrived, she jumped right in front of them and told them I'd violently attacked her son. Well, I knew just what to do. I told the cops I could bring up the security footage, completely with sound, as proof. After they watched it, they went out to the parking lot to confront the lady. They asked her if anyone was around to watch her son and she told them his father was at work. That's when they told her she was under arrest for uttering threats and filing a bogus report. More screeching, threats, and waterworks followed. They actually ended up arresting her for the phony report. Not only did she get a lifetime ban of the restaurant, she also got one for the entire mall it was connected to.
About 15 years ago, I worked as a manager at Little Caesars. My schedule typically included 3 or 4 late shifts per week and 1 morning shift. We had different specials every day. Most days, it was a 2-for-1 deal. On one of those nights, a difficult customer ordered 2 pizzas for pickup over the phone. When he got there, he said he also wanted bread and sauce, but he'd only brought enough money to pay for the pizza deal. I apologized and explained that there wasn't anything I could do. His response was heated. He argued that his kids wanted the bread. I explained again that I was unable to help. I couldn't just give away food for free for no reason. I'd be in hot water if I did, especially with other customers present. Had he been the only customer, I might have considered it. But I firmly told him no. His reaction was extreme. He had an explosive temper tantrum, insulted me, declared, "This isn't over," and left with the pizzas he'd purchased. The next day, I learned that he'd exaggerated the incident to the store's general manager, resulting in the manager berating me over the phone. This customer claimed I had scorned him for not affording bread for his kids, and that I'd publicly humiliated him. In truth, I'd been apologetic and careful to avoid trouble by giving away food for free. I guess that wasn't good enough. The manager disciplined me for supposed poor customer service skills and compensated the man with a free $40 order. When the man visited again the following day, he was still angry even though he'd gotten $40 worth of food for lying. He took every opportunity to imply that I was part of an irresponsible younger generation with a poor grasp of customer service. It was extremely frustrating, and as I started to prepare his food, I decided that it was the last straw. Not only did I very carefully prepare his food to his specifications, I also took my time doing it. He kept getting angrier and angrier. Then, finally, his order was ready to come out of the oven. I made eye contact as I took his pizzas out and slid them directly into the dirty, smelly trash. I then took off my apron and left a note for the store manager that I would no longer tolerate working in a place where employees were treated poorly. I told the guy to enjoy his pizza on the way out, and within days I had a much better job where my managers treated me with dignity.
A long time ago, I used to work as an assistant manager at Blockbuster Video. And when I say a long time ago, I meant that it was the era of VHS tapes. One night, as I was working my shift, the store phone rings. A woman I'll refer to as Karen was on the other end. She had received a call in the day about her overdue movies and was not happy about it. A quick look at her account on our system confirmed that 3 movies were overdue and should have been returned a week ago. When I told her this, her response was terrifying. She literally screamed at me over the phone. She insisted that her daughter had rented those movies, and they had been returned after her sleepover. I checked the return bin, but they were not there. I even checked the shelves to see if they had been misplaced, but no luck. She then tore into me accusing us of trying to swindle her. She warned she would tell her husband, a lawyer, who would sue us all. I continued with my shift, unaware of what awaited me. An hour later, Karen barged into the store. She stormed over to the counter and slapped down a stack of VHS tapes, berating the clerk in the process. From where I was checking and returned movies, I could see that they were indeed the ones her daughter had supposedly returned. But it didn't end there. The following day, I was greeted by a man in a suit. He asked to speak with the manager. As I approached him, he revealed that he was Karen's attorney husband. For a minute, I was scared he'd come to fulfill her promise to sue us all, but I was so wrong. He had come to apologize for his wife's behavior. You won't believe this, but he even told me, "We're trying to get her under control. The doctor just prescribed her Xanax."
I used to be a manager at a popular, mid-level handbag store. Picture bags that would be loved by the average Karen, priced between $200 to $400. Most of our clientele were wonderful. However, there was this one woman who really stood out. She was tall, with bright red hair. She stomped in one day, wanting us to fix her 2-decade-old bag for free. When we couldn't fulfill this request, she insisted that we swap her heavily worn, even rather smelly, old bag for a shiny new one, absolutely free of charge. Now, our policy had recently been updated and there was no longer any kind of long-term warranty or repair service. A free repair was usually only provided within the first year of a new bag purchase, and it definitely didn't apply to a bag that was clearly 20 years old. So, I explained this to her. At that time, I was quite young for my position, so she refused to accept my explanation and asked to speak to a manager. When I told her that I was indeed the manager, she turned the same shade of red as her hair. She started to rant and threatened to call corporate. Even swore she'd never step foot in the store again. I knew most of our regular customers, even people who'd only bought items a couple of times, and I'd never seen her before. No big loss. After all, we were losing a customer who refused to pay for the repair of a 20-year-old bag, and who probably hadn't made a new purchase in the same amount of time. My response to her was a polite customer service smile, and the phrase, "I'm truly sorry, but it's the company policy." Demanding our company's contact number, she told me that she was going to get me fired. So, I gave her the standard customer service number that anyone can find online. She cluelessly accepted it and stormed out, leaving her keys behind on the counter. On realizing her oversight halfway out, she turned a deep shade of red and came back to grab her keys, all while I wore a smile on my face. The entire scene was absolutely comical. I saw her again months later, talking to another team member, who was also telling her there was nothing she could do about her old bag. I made eye contact with her and said hello, and she completely ignored me.
A lady named Karen wanted to return an open, clearly used board game, but she didn't have a receipt. I suggested that she take store credit, but she wasn't happy with that and demanded to speak to my manager. After hearing her out, my manager stepped in. As the discussion got heated, she pulled out that classic line, "Back in my day, the customer was always right." My manager, looking thoughtful, responded, "I've never really believed in that mantra. In the end, we could only offer her store credit."
I once had a customer who I'll cave Dave. I'm American, but at the time, I was setting up a customer service center overseas for the company. I worked for. The employees at this new call center were both helpful and knowledgeable. In fact, some of them had more experience at this type of thing than me. Enter Dave. Dave refused to talk to anyone who wasn't American. So, he called and asked to speak to an American. They transferred him to me, and his first question was, "Are you in the US?" I answered honestly and said no, I wasn't in the US at the moment. Dave didn't take this well. He screamed something about foreigners to me and hung up. But that wasn't the end. Dave then spent the next 3 hours repeating the same pattern. He would call, demand to speak to an American, get transferred to me, ask if I was in the US, and then hang up. So, we kept repeating this loop for 3 hours. I was getting paid by the hour, so I really didn't care.
Once upon a time, during my cash-strapped college days, I worked at a call center that represented a certain insurance company. This company had made a massive mistake affecting thousands of clients' insurance policies, so the people who were calling in were starting at a baseline where they were already pretty angry with us. Our team's job was to handle incoming calls, issuing apologies, and trying to sort out the mess while assuring customers that the company was on top of the situation. It wasn't the most enjoyable gig, to say the least. A large chunk of our clientele were elderly folks experiencing difficulties acquiring their medication due to the insurance blunder. Now, let's get acquainted with a character I like to call Mr. Karen. One day, Mr. Karen calls, his voice booming from the start about how his meds hadn't been approved and he couldn't afford them without insurance. Initially, I'm inclined to sympathize with him, given his situation. But regardless, I stick to my script of apologies and attempts to troubleshoot the issue. He, however, isn't buying any of the solutions I propose and grows increasingly irate. After 15 minutes of tense conversation, he demands my name and ID number, threatening to get me fired, as though I single-handedly brought about his misery. I give him my first and last name. It just so happens that my last name is pretty unique, and that's when the dynamics of our conversation change completely. There's a pause from him, followed by the question, "Are you related to such and such baseball player?" Surprised, I confirm that yes, the player was indeed my great-great-great-uncle. It turns out that a player from the 1920s had turned our hot-headed Mr. Karen into a fanboy. He'd seen my relative play during his childhood, which would place him in his late 80s or early 90s at the time of our call. Well, talking to a distant relative of the player transported him to Cloud 9. Adding to the pleasant twist in our day, Mr. Karen quickly swapped his Karen mantle and became a curious, wide-eyed kid inquiring about everything I knew about my great-uncle, who, unfortunately, had passed away 10 years before my birth. This unexpected interaction totally made both our days. Afterward, Mr. Karen lost his title, but he left behind a heartwarming tale I could share among the endless accounts of furious Karens.
I worked as an assistant manager at a well-known clothing store. One day, a lady walked in with some items she wanted to return and a gift receipt. According to our store's policy, refunds for items returned with a gift receipt are provided in the form of merchandise or gift cards instead of cash. This, predictably, didn't go over well. This customer was so agitated that she started yelling. But I wasn't about to budge. There wasn't even a way for me to bypass the return on the register. Finally, she took the gift card, but she complained about it the whole time. Then, on her way out, she decided to show her displeasure by slamming the glass door. She slammed it so hard that it broke and she scampered off immediately. But there was something she forgot about. We had her contact details from her receipt, so we were able to send her the repair bill for the door.